In this video, I want to give suggestions on how to do well with writing assignments. I'm going to apologize that my camera is off for this video. I'm having some camera issues today. So first, some general suggestions. Keep a formal academic tone when you write. This is usually important to do in most academic writing, especially in history. Please use your own words. Part of this requirement is that show that you have an understanding of whatever it is you're being asked to write about. And so it's a good practice to not have the sources that you're using in front of you as you write. Instead, read those sources and then write about whatever it is that they discuss that relates to your question you're answering. Support everything you write using evidence. You need to cite the sources that you use. And I've talked about this in other videos, so I'm not going to go way in depth, but I'm going to talk about it some more here. We have a requirement that you use in-text citations. And we'll see some examples of those in a few minutes. So the point here is that you understand the material well enough that you can compose a detailed answer, a coherent answer, an answer that's logical, and an answer that is accurate. You should be able to use evidence to support your answer. It's not what you think necessarily. It is your interpretation of other sources. You did not participate in the War of 1812, so you don't know what the causes of the War of 1812 were. You weren't there. But what you can do is look at evidence based on what scholars in the field have said to say, oh, these were the three primary causes of the War of 1812, blah, blah, and blah. And then you show an understanding of scholarly writing conventions by citing in your answer, by saying the three causes of the War of 1812 were this, this, and then parentheses, author's last name, comma year, comma page number. The questions that you're answering throughout most of this course in the writing assignments are called worksheets, but they aren't like typical worksheets that you might have used in the past. These aren't like typical questions after reading a chapter in a textbook. You cannot just restate what your textbook says. You have to cite it. You have to tell your reader where you got the information when you use that information. For most assignments, you're expected to use between 3 to 5 sources. Your textbook can be one of those sources, but you're expected to find and use 2 other sources, at least. And I've talked about that in other videos. I'm not going to belabor that too much here. So every topic has multiple sections from the textbook that are assigned. Every topic has additional resources that are assigned. Some of those are required, some are optional. You should at least skim the required ones. The resources will almost always be useful in answering the questions. Make sure you cite those resources when you answer them. By the way, occasionally your textbook will have answers in sections that are not assigned in that week. So feel free to use the index of your textbook or the search function in your online textbook to find information. You have to cite information. When you find information from a source like your textbook or some other source, and you've paraphrased it, you've put it into your own words, you still need to cite where you got that information from. Your reader needs to know where the information you're citing came from. So just like you would cite a direct quote, you also cite a paraphrase or a summary. The only difference is you're not using quotation marks. And so for your textbook, for example, you'll always cite it using this format. In parentheses, the author's last name, a comma, the year, a comma, a lowercase p, period, and the page number. This is always how you will cite your textbook. There's no other way to cite it. So the only thing that's going to change when you cite from your textbook is what page number the information came from. The citation, for the sake of ease here, the citation should be placed after the information being cited. Please don't put the citation in the middle of a paragraph and have no citations after it, because then I will ask, what's your source for the second half of your answer? And you will get a poorer grade than you would have received otherwise, and nobody wants that. Here's an example from a paper that I wrote a few years ago. The content isn't important, but notice what I've done here. I've highlighted my citations, and I talk about this more in another video as well if you want more details, but notice I've cited, so this is telling my reader that, oh, the information before this cite comes from page 135 in this book. And then this one says, oh, now this information comes from page 136. And then the remaining information comes from page 137. Before you submit your assignment, your writing assignment, you should ask yourself these questions. Did I cite any direct quotes and put them in quotation marks? Remember, direct quotes are never required in this course, and in fact, I would discourage you from using them. As much as possible, I want you to use your words. And that relates to number 2. Did I cite the information I used in each answer? Every answer should include at least one in-text citation. That's also sometimes called a parenthetical citation because we put it in parentheses. You always have to tell your reader where the information was found. If it's information you used in your paper, in your writing, you have to tell your reader where you got it from when you use the information. Did I also include an APA references list? So you need both. You need in-text citations and a references list. And then if you use direct quotes, that should be no more than 10% of any answer. So if you wrote 150 words for an answer, no more than 15 words should be direct quotes. If you use direct quotes, make sure that they are directly connected to what you're writing about. And again, you don't need to use them. And then finally, did you use for your paper, for your writing, only scholarly sources? That means your sources were either your assigned textbook, the book by Schultz, or sources that were found in the resources given for the topic on Halo, or sources found in the library research guide for the topic other than encyclopedias, unless encyclopedias are allowed in the directions for the assignment, which they usually are not. Were the sources found in a credible outside source found through the library databases? It's always safe to use the resources provided directly in Halo. The topic resources there, including your textbook, are fine. They count. They will count as scholarly sources. The research guides provided in the library have some scholarly sources you can use, but the encyclopedia entries should only be used for your own benefit. Now, textbooks are not normally considered scholarly sources, but for our purposes, your textbook counts. Don't use other textbooks. Also, don't use general reference works like encyclopedias, and don't use popular websites like history.com. In general, you should not go to Google or Bing or another search engine to find sources. You should either use the sources in Halo or go to the library's website. Of course, Wikipedia should never be used as a source for academic writing, but you should also avoid general encyclopedias like the Encyclopedia Britannica or Salem Press Encyclopedia or Funk and Wagnalls. Those are not secondary sources. Those are tertiary sources. They are good sources to build your background with, but not really to build scholarly answers on. Please read the directions. The directions actually change sometimes from assignment to assignment. And so it will often say that encyclopedias are not to be used. If it says encyclopedias are not to be used, don't use any encyclopedia. Also, your sources have to be relevant to the topic. So, for example, this happens a lot in one of the later assignments that's asking you about the U.S. after World War II. And there's a question that asks about what was the role of religion in the United States in the post-war era. And I've had several students who cited work that was about religion in the post-war era, but it wasn't about religion in the US. It was about religion in some other country. You know, religion in Germany, religion in Italy, religion in Japan, somewhere else. That's not directly relevant. Similarly, there's a question too in the same assignment, I think, that asks about why was the automobile so important in American society after World War II. And lots of students write about Henry Ford and his invention, essential invention of the assembly line. That was not after World War II. Doesn't apply. It's not relevant. Make sure you use relevant sources. Again, these questions have to be answered with a yes. Yes, I cited any direct quotes I used. Yes, I cited all the information I used when I used it. Yes, I included a references list. Please make sure your citations match. Again, make sure the citation used matches the information you say it supports. Again, if you say you're writing about post-World War II religion in America, but your source is about Germany, that doesn't match. Even if in the one paragraph you're citing it mentions the US, it's not a good source. Similarly, if you use an in-text citation, which you should, you need a corresponding entry in the bibliography. If something is in your references list, and if something is in your references list, that means that you have cited it in your paper. They have to match that way too. So here's another example of it again. If multiple sentences in a row come from the same source, put the citation at the end of the last sentence. So you don't need to put a citation at the end of every sentence. If everything in your answer comes from the same source, put the citation at the end of the answer. Please check your Lopes Write reports once you submit. If large portions of your answers are the same, please revise and resubmit. I have to file academic dishonesty reports for issues like plagiarism, which includes lack of citations, and it could include use of AI. Please don't use AI. Now, you're going to get high positives sometimes because Lopes Write will check the questions themselves, and those will get matched. So you have to look at the report, just like I do. If I see a high percentage, I will check the report to see. And almost always it's because either the references were the same references, which is fine, or it just is seeing the same questions. Do not copy and paste from sources. Do not copy and paste from your textbook. Do not copy and paste from your textbook. Finally, I say this in my grading video as well. I really want you to do well in the course. I dislike strongly filing academic dishonesty reports. It's very time consuming. I don't enjoy doing it. Please cite your information. That's the number one issue. And it's okay if you make an error. Like if you are using APA citations somewhat incorrectly, if they aren't formatted right, I'm going to point that out. And there's one or two assignments where you might lose a couple of points for it, but it's not a big deal. Okay, I'm not picky about that. But what I'm picky about is that I want you to be honest when you write. And part of being honest when you write is showing that the information comes from another source when you use that information, just as I did here. This information is from this particular source. I didn't just write this paragraph and expect my reader to see my references list at the end and say, oh, I bet this paragraph came from Limerick. You just need to cite. It's not a big deal. It's not like we can get into the weeds of APA, and the weeds of APA can be kind of annoying. And I will mention some of those weeds occasionally, and things like your formatting of your references page and stuff. But those aren't big deals. The big deal is that you make what I like to call a good faith effort to cite. If I see a paragraph and it has no citations, that answer will not earn credit. Please cite. If I see a paragraph, and if I saw like this paragraph, for example, and if there was no citation here at the end, right? There is a cite here, great, a cite here, great, and then nothing else. I'm going to ask, Where did you get the information that the Ogallala Reservoir has begun to dry up? Where do you know that there's been high costs for water and legal fights within states? And you are not going to get a good grade on this because you haven't told me where you got the information. You have to tell me where you got the information, where you use it. And notice I've put page numbers so that the person reading this can go to that book. I think this was a book, and look at page 135 in the book to make sure that, to find out more about this sentence. So please cite, please cite, please cite. Simply where you got the information, what year was the information published, what page number is the information on. It's the basic core of citing is not something that I personally believe is that difficult for adult learners. Paraphrase and cite. Paraphrase and cite. Write things in your own words and then explain using a citation, just like I did here, where you found that information. Again, if there are minor things, and sometimes people will forget the period here, or they will put the period here by mistake or something else. I might comment on those minor things. It's not a big issue. What is a big issue is if I were not going to see any citations in a paragraph, or if I was only going to see a citation at the start of the paragraph. Please cite. If you cite, you are halfway home of doing well on your writing assignments. Thank you for watching.